when Ebenezer talks with Pastor Milton Bunting.
Grace and peace to all of you. I am grateful that you have joined us this evening for our another edition of Ebenezer Talks. I am delighted to have my good friend, Pastor Clinton McFarland, Senior Pastor of the Grace Baptist Church in Stockbridge, Georgia. Thank you, Doc, for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Dr. McFarland has been with us several times and preached. And so we're grateful to be on tonight talking about how we're navigating our churches and how to navigate the church through these two pandemics, this COVID-19 and this climate of racism, national climate of racism. Pastor McFarland, tell us a little bit about Grace and how it became, you became senior pastor and founder. How did that come about?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Pastor, for having these conversations that are keeping your people enlightened as it relates to the things that's going on in society. So thank you, first of all, for this and having me on this evening.
Thank you.
I'm pastoring Grace Baptist Church. We are in Metro Atlanta, a suburb of Atlanta called Stockbridge, Georgia. Grace has been in existence for about 5.5 years. And of course, the Lord has blessed us in a major way. I started Grace 5.5 years ago after pastoring for 18 years altogether. I was at Mount Pleasant in Atlanta for 6 years, and prior to that, I was in Mississippi. So those together would have been 24 years, I'm sorry, and Mississippi for 18 years, and at Mount Pleasant for 6 years, and been at Grace now 5.5 years. And so God placed it in my spirit to leave a thriving church, one church, two locations, 3 services. Membership was about 2,500 at that time. And God said, leave it and start afresh. And little did I know that he was going to bless me to the level that I've been blessed. But I'm happy to say that he has smiled on me. He smiled on Grace. And I think we have made a major impact in the kingdom.
That's awesome. I've heard your testimony on several occasions that you've shared with myself and some of my friends when you come up to preach for us. And your testimony is absolutely phenomenal, how the Lord has used you and navigated you through the various channels to get you where you are today. So we give God praise for that. Doc, tell us how has it been pastoring through this pandemic?
Well, it's been a major challenge. However, I believe that creativity is birthed through challenges, and we've experienced that. But it's been, I won't say it's been easy. It's been challenging because none of us have ever passed through a pandemic. There's not a book out on it. Normally, and you and I know we're pastors who are young and have been younger. And when we were younger, when we had an issue that we didn't understand how to navigate our way through it, we could call a senior pastor.
Exactly.
He could advise us and give us, helpful hints as it relates to working our way through it. But who do you call in a pandemic when, whether you've been pastoring 50 years or 5 years, you've never been through it? But we've made it. We're surviving it. It's taken a lot of work. Honestly, I'm more tired now than I've ever been. I'm working harder than I've ever worked in almost 30 years of pastoring. It's been stressful because you're trying to figure out ways to still engage your members, to provide a worship experience but keep them engaged at the same time. And so that's been stressful. Then the stress of dealing with technology. You never know when it's going to work or when
Yeah.
it's not going to work. We've had those issues as well, where couldn't get the streaming service working, or it goes halfway and cuts off. So all of it has been quite a challenge, but at the same time, we have found some creative ways to do it in the midst of this that we would not have discovered were it not for this pandemic.
Yeah, yeah. And I think regardless of the size or the location of your church or your ministry, we all have felt the pain of trying to keep our members um, involved and keep ministry going and keep them fed spiritually.
Yeah.
Have you all gone back inside your church yet?
No, we've not gone back for Sunday worship services. We're still streaming only. The way we do it is we record on Thursday night for Sunday.
Hmm.
And I have an editor who edits everything after we've recorded it. And we run it live for Sunday, and that has worked very well for us. We've not gone back. However, I have had some services where I've experimented with it. I had a shift revival 3 nights where I brought in some guys and I put about 50 people in the sanctuary. My sanctuary seats 1,000, and they were very well spaced out. Quite a few stipulations as to what they would need to do to be a part of that service. And that was very successful. I met with my staff actually today, and we talked about possibly doing the same thing for some of our Sunday services to give the people a worship experience who still want to come, but of course, keeping the numbers limited. But we're just not even sure about that right now. So the answer to your question is not yet. Not
Yeah,
yet.
yeah. And with the resurgence that we see taking place,
Yeah.
it's going to be very hard to even make a decision. I would want to go back. We have an outside service, and it's worked extremely well for us.
Hmm.
We even had Good Friday outside, and we brought a guy in to preach.
Good.
But I want to go back in September. But
Okay.
we just got to play it by ear and see what the Lord says, because we have no idea of how bad the resurgence is going to be. Right now in Virginia, we're staying at a level key. We're not really rising like some other the 32 states are rising. I think it was like 32 that are really rising
That's good.
heavily. But we just got to be careful, because in my opinion, on my end, in my context, my members are my main concern. I don't want anything to happen to my staff, my members, because of my negligence or because of my immaturity, if you will, of wanting to hurriedly get back inside
Hmm.
of the church. And so I think all pastors have to be mindful of our congregations, because we don't want to be the cause of some fatal or something tragic happening to them.
Most certainly.
Have you had, yeah, go ahead, Doc.
No, I was agreeing with you.
Have you had a lot of pastors, because I've sat and listened to you and gained knowledge down through the years. Have you had a lot of pastors to reach out to you for advice as to how to navigate through? And what are some of the things that you would say to some pastors, regardless of the age, as to how to, keep your church afloat, keep your church going financially, and keep the ministry thriving to some extent and missions thriving? What would you say to pastors?
Well, I've had a lot of pastors, honestly. And one of the reasons is that I travel, as you know, extensively. And so I have a lot of guys that I seem to have influence with. And so many of them have reached out to me. And there are a variety of ways that you can keep your people engaged. Number one, you just got to love your people. You've got to be concerned. And the way to do it will emanate from your love. In other words, if I love you, I'll find a way to stay engaged. Smaller congregations, it's a lot easier because you have less members. I've actually had a pastor friend who has called every member on his roll and prayed with them personally. Well, I have about 2,500 members, and so for me to do that personally is not even logical. But I still had I have about 30 ministers who are part of our church, and we broke the roll up by alphabets, and we gave each of them a list. We also gave them a script as to what to say. Number one, I'm calling on behalf of my pastor, Pastor Clinton McFarland, and the Grace Baptist Church. He has asked that I would call to check on you in this coronavirus climate, such and such and such. And so we were able to do that. That was one way. We've actually had some drive-bys where we've driven by the house to check on members and just sat in the car. Those are the tangible ways. As you've said, with your services outdoors, we've had 3 services outdoors. Ironically, 2 of them, it rained and we had to, navigate through that. Zoom has been very effective. In fact, I had maybe about 40 or 50 people on this morning from my Seasoned Saints ministry. They get on every Wednesday at 10:45, stay on about an hour and 15 minutes, and they discuss things, and then they have the Sunday school lesson. So I jumped on that today and just spoke with them and shared with them. It's a variety of things. If you got Facebook, I've done Facebook Live prayer, 6 a.m. from time to time. If you got Zoom, you can do all of your Zoom meetings. Just a variety of ways to stay engaged. We have a few members who have actually have the coronavirus right now. I give God praise that I've not had one member to die from the coronavirus. And I've had one who went into the hospital for 4 days. He's out recovering at home. Everybody else, were able to recover at home. But we've done things like, call to see what they need. Say, well, I need some vitamin C, need some zinc, I need some vegetables, I need some fruit. Well, we go and get it. Somebody takes it to them. And then, of course, we feed. Matter of fact, this past yesterday, we fed 240 families in our food pantry. So the virus has presented some challenges and problems, but it has also afforded us the opportunity to really be the church. And sometimes when things are comfortable and we're complacent, we're not really, the church as the church ought to be. Most of the stuff that we do is inside of the building. Well, we've been forced out of the building now. And so everything we're doing now is occurring outside of the building. And so I think that, we've stepped up to the challenges. And I tell guys, and I'll say this, I tell guys who say, well, I don't have all of the technology that you have. Well, you have a phone. There are phone lines and calls. What is it called? This, where we do our prayer call conference. Yes, conference phone lines. You can engage your members. I have a service where I can record a voicemail and send it to every member who's hooked up with our text alerts, our calls, and I'll just send a minute and a half message. Pastor's praying for you, I had you on my mind, such and such. I'll get on there and sing to them, just crazy stuff, just to lift that day. And just being creative with how we stay engaged. And it's been working really, really good.
Yeah, we've been using the conference call system every Wednesday for the last several weeks. just going through things, giving them updates on what's happening with the church, and praying with them most importantly. And I think it's been working really well because it gives me an opportunity to share with them things that I may not would normally share Sunday morning being outside. And now that we're in the summer, you want to try to get them in. You don't want to rush the spirit, but you want to get them in, get them out because it's hot with them sitting outside. And so it's a lot of ways, you're absolutely right. It's a lot of ways that we as pastors can use technology, and it doesn't have to be on a mega scale. You just got to have the right people to get you hooked up and get things in line, and it'll work. It'll work.
And then you got to have the heart. You know,
Exactly.
you obviously have the heart for your people. I know you, and I know how you feel about the Ebenezer family. And you have the heart. If you have the heart, then you'll find the means, the way, the wherewithal to stay in touch with your people. So that's most important, to just have a heart. When you love people, I love the people that I serve, and I miss them.
Exactly.
And they are family. And so I just want to make sure that they're all right. And however I can do that, I just want to do it.
I think one of the biggest challenges for me has been, and I know you may not can relate because you've got a much larger congregation than I have, but one of the biggest things I take pride in is being able to fellowship with my members after service.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not too many of my members that I don't touch, shake hands, high five, hug, speak to in some way when we were inside. And now, you know, we have been kind of handcuffed, if you will, from being able to do that. So we've got to use other ways to stay in contact. But I want to shift a little bit, because when we were going through the COVID-19 and just when we thought we were nearly done, then we become involved or engrossed into a resurrecting of the racist or the racial climate. And you being in Atlanta, having witnessed, or maybe not witnessed, but been a part and seeing how things have played out, how has this racism piece affected you in your ministry? Well, let me go back, because you're from Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So how much? Let me rewind.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, were you affected by racism? Being a Black man, your father was a preacher, come from a generation of preachers. How did that, if at all, affect you growing up? Before we talk about it now.
Well, I was affected by it, but I didn't know it until I got grown, until I became a man. And I looked back on certain things, you know. For instance, when I was up until the 8th grade, up until I was in the 8th grade, the white folk left the school first. They had 2 bells. The first ring was for the white folk to leave, and all Black folks stayed in the class. After all of the white folk were going on their buses, number one, the buses were segregated. And then the second bell would ring, all of the Black folk would leave. Well, at the time, I didn't know, you know, you can be in a racist situation and you're so in it and you grew up in it until you don't even realize that it is a systematic racism. So looking back on it, I'm like, man, that was like really racist and segregated. When we would have assemblies, all of the white people would sit up front. All of the Black people would sit in the back. And we didn't think anything of it as students.
Because it was normal.
It was normal, and it was not mandated that it happened. But it was so ingrained into our psyche that we didn't even notice it. So I've had certain incidents, of course, with the police after I became a man, being stopped by the police and treated, you know, harshly. Gun pulled on me in Mississippi. at night. It's very dark. So I've had those incidents. Um, but, the disheartening thing, Pastor, is that that was 35 years ago, and we're
I know,
still dealing with it.
and we're still here. We are later, and we're still dealing with seemingly the same, if not worse.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
And so,
How much have you preached any social justice or done anything in your church in these last couple of weeks, a few weeks?
oh, yes, yes, I have been dealing with it quite a bit in Bible classes on Tuesday night, as well as Sunday services. In fact, a couple of Sundays ago, Father's Day, I took that day, and my theme for the day was build up a black man.
Hmm.
And that's what I dealt with. That was the title of my sermon. And I talked about how black men in America have been beaten down. Don't care what your educational level is, don't care what your position is. We're beaten down, and we are looked at in a certain way by virtue of our skin color. And these things will beat you down. Your own jobs where you're highly qualified, but you never get the position. You know, the police stops you and treats you inhumanely at times.
Hmm.
Uh, Try to start a business, you can't get the loan. We're just beaten down. Whereas white men are given chance after chance. We've got a president who has filed for bankruptcy many, many times, but yet
Exactly.
can still get loans and become the president of the United States. Uh,
Exactly.
Black men we're not afforded that privilege. And so I preached on that because we need to be built up. And I talked about how incumbent it is upon his woman, so to speak, to build him up. And not that it's her responsibility solely. Of course, it's his job, but how she can assist. And I got it from, I don't know if you remember the miniseries Roots
Uh-huh.
that aired for the first time, I think in '77.
Yep.
I never shall forget the character that was called Chicken George. Chicken
Uh-huh.
George raised roosters to fight. His master was a gambler, so he gambled away George to another plantation. Well, George had a wife and a family, but yet he was able to send him off. Well, long story short, George went there and obviously was successful in his endeavors to the point where he was able to purchase his freedom. He came back after purchasing his freedom for his wife and for his children, and he was going to stay in that area a free man, but they were still slaves. When George came back, he and Tom, his son, went into town, and once they went in, George is a proud man. Tom is there. One of the white men in town called Tom the N word and told him to come here and give me some water that was out of the water fountain that was right next to the guy. And so Tom, being a slave and knew that his life could be taken, he went and did it, and did as they had to do at that day. So then he said, now my brother is thirsty. And Tom said, all right, master, I'll get you some water. He said, no, I want that Negro or N word, you know what I'm trying to say. I
Yeah.
want him to get it. And George said, I am not the N word. My name is George Moore, and I'm a free man. Man said, give me your papers. He looked at the papers and said, well, don't you know there's a rule in this state that if you stay here free for 6 weeks, you become an N word again. Threw the papers on the ground. George had fought and worked for his freedom. And now here again, he's put down and reduced to feel like nothing. He goes home and he's telling his wife about it. And he's saying, listen, if I stay here, I'm going to become a slave again. He said, but I love you guys so much. I don't want to leave again. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And on that clip, she took a broken man and spoke to him in such a way to build him up. And she looked at him and said, George, I'm now married to a free man, and I will never live with a slave again. You go and do what you got to do and work, and you'll come back and buy our freedom and such and such. And she kept looking at him and she kept saying, my beautiful man, my beautiful man. And that gave me the idea right there of how a woman can build up a broken man. And so that was the essence of my sermon. So, you know, that was my approach to dealing with systemic racism, social justice, but I've dealt with several things even prior to that and since then.
Yeah. We have a major problem in America. And I've been talking to people, a lot of white people, I've been talking to them. And the problem is with the heart. We've got to get folks' heart to change towards and towards people and learning how to love people. It's awesome to hear how you took that and used that to minister to the hearts of men and women, because the Black woman plays a major role in our lives.
Yes.
And they have a job, and sometimes I wonder, do they even know the power that they have? I don't want to say it over us, but in actuality, they do have a power over us to push and propel us to be what God has truly called us to be.
She can make you or break you.
Exactly. 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 Are you finding that the time has come for us to really work with our young men, our teenage men? You have sons, you have one son, I believe, right?
I do. He's 22.
Yeah. And so the time is really now for us as middle-aged and older men to really begin working with our young Black boys, teenage boys, teaching them some of the things that you just said, so that they hopefully won't have to face what many of us have faced and our forefathers faced. And if they do face it, they'll be able to navigate through it.
Yes, indeed. I think that time is now, just as our fathers and other men in the community and women did for us. One of the things I want to add to that, Doc, is that a Black woman is the most beautiful creature that God created. I tell my church all the time, if God made anything better than a Black woman, he kept it for himself, because he said, man just ain't worthy of anything better. And it's incumbent also upon us as brothers, because a lot of times they are beaten down too, because we are broken, we break them. So it has to be reciprocal. I wanted to say that it has to be give and take. Many of our brothers become very successful, and you know, we think that we're too good almost. And I don't want to make this a controversy, but it's true. Maybe too good to even date in our race or what have you. But that Black woman is special. She is a creature that is created in the most beautiful way. And we need to respect her. That's one of the things we need to teach our sons, to respect his woman, respect the Black woman, respect women in general. And it's incumbent upon us to teach them about the struggle. And here's the good news, is that I think the young people are seeing this. When you look at this movement that's occurring right now, this movement is propelled and perpetuated by young folks. They are engaged, they are involved, they are tired, and they are just saying, in essence, we're not going to take what our parents took, and whatever we have to do, if we have to fight. And I don't agree with burning and looting, but I do think that sometimes that gets more attention than we shall overcome, you know. And so they're doing what they have to do in order to get the message across and let this country know that we are here, we're not going anywhere, and we're going to keep fighting. And I think that as a church, we've got to make sure that we stay engaged because, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, is a good movement, but it's not a church movement. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's not a good movement, but we don't need them to be out front and we're in the background, you know, singing "Shall We Gather at the River" and
Yeah.
in the sweet by and by. We've got to stay engaged, and we do that in a variety of ways. Everybody may not be out marching. Everybody may not be out protesting. We may be teaching the importance of controlling our dollars. We may be teaching build up a black man. We may be teaching. I've been speaking out a lot to the white uh, uh, evangelicals because I think that racism in this country, number one, it was started by the white church. It was perpetuated. Slavery. Many of those who wanted us to still be in slavery were Southern Baptist members. And racism in this country is still perpetuated by the white church. And it's incumbent upon our white brothers and sisters to stand with us for what's right
Exactly.
and stand up because, you know, the Christianity, and I have to say this, I had a lesson that I was going to teach, but the Lord said, hold back. You know, I didn't teach it. It was quite controversial, but God said, don't teach it right now. Do this in a different way. But in that lesson, I was going to talk about how white Christianity looks nothing like Jesus. Absolutely nothing like Jesus. Jesus was not a hater. Jesus was not a bigot. Jesus was for the least, the looked overs, and the left out.
Yeah.
Jesus was not a racist. Jesus was not for slavery. He was for the hurting. Black lives would have mattered with Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus left the 99. You know, when we say Black Lives Matter and they want to say all lives matter, Jesus would have said, listen, I left the 99 for that one that was disenfranchised because I wanted him to know particularly and specifically that his life matter. But when we look at the white church, the white Christianity, and I have to say it, it looks nothing
Like Jesus.
like Jesus. No, absolutely not. If Jesus came back today and walked into some of our churches, he wouldn't even recognize what's going on. And so we've got to speak truth to power, and that's where the power is. Nowhere in the world Jesus would have supported a guy like Trump. Nowhere in the world.
Yeah.
Don't
And
believe.
and to hear some of these national major televangelists, white televangelists, throw their support behind Trump after knowing and hearing and witnessing the disrespect, the derogatory statements towards um, challenged news reporters and females and countries that he felt were beneath us. That is not what Jesus stood for. Jesus
No.
stood for the least of these. And so it is evident that you're telling the truth, Doc, because you can see how our white evangelicals have gravitated. And then when they're called out for their bigotry and for their racism, then they want to come on social media and give us a watered down apology
Mhm.
and try to reverse it and make it seem or appear as if that's not what they meant.
Right, right. And you know, Jesus said, "It is not that which goes in a man that defiles him, but it's that which comes out of him, because what comes out of his mouth is indicative of what's in his heart." So what you
Yeah,
said the first time is what you meant.
yeah,
But you got called on the carpet, and you got caught, and now you want to come back and apologize. And guys, they're gonna have to do better because their whiteness and America, the way they want it to be, is more important than human life. You fight for the life of the unborn, but ignore the life of those after they've been born. That's not Jesus.
yeah. And it's just as much racism in the Democratic Party as it is in the Republican Party.
Oh, yes.
We don't, so many times we preach from what we've been taught to support Democrat, vote Democrat, and I don't have a problem with that. But we need to lay all the cards out on the table. Racism is everywhere. It's not just in one set political party.
Right.
Racism is all around the whole layout of our political arena.
Of course.
And we've got to deal with, so many different things and address these issues as it relates to us moving forward.
Well, you're right. Racism is in both parties. I mean, big time. But one of the things and we've got to address those. We've got to hold them accountable when we give whoever we give our vote. One of the things, though, I still have to do is learn how to vote for the lesser of two evils, and a lot of times that's what we are doing. Both are evil, but which one is lesser?
Yeah.
Until I can get to a point where we can really have a viable party or candidate. Because if I disengage the process, then automatically my vote goes to the most evil one.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage everybody, even though the Democratic Party is racist as well, it is the lesser of
the two
evils. You will see more Black people, more people who look like you at the table, in the campaigns, in the cabinets, which has helped some, Of course, we're not getting everything that we want, but sometimes you have to get what you can get and keep fighting for what you want. Now, here's one of the things that we've not done well as Black people. We've put people in office and we've given them no agenda. It's just like the marches and the protests. Well, we're marching. Okay, what are we marching for? What do you want? Where are your end game items?
Yeah, what is your action plan and what is the
What is
ultimate
your action plan? Okay, if they say, all right, what do you want? What can you tell them? Justice? Well, what does justice look like?
Yeah.
So there has to be a strategy that is put together that we present to the candidate. If you're going to vote Democratic, if you're anti-Trump, which I am, and because of that, you're going to vote for Joe Biden, whom I'm not a big fan of, but I'm just voting against Trump. Well, if we're going to do that in droves, then there needs to be, and I don't know who's responsible for formulating the list or what, but where is our list that we give to Joe Biden and said, now, if you want our vote, here are the things we want. Do you know why Trump is the way he is? Is because the evangelicals hold him accountable for the things that they have on the list. They want these conservative judges, so they tolerate. They know Trump is a bigot. They know Trump is like absolutely an idiot, but they tolerate him to get those things on the list because they understand he's not our candidate. And the reason we know he's not that candidate, because in the primaries, they were negative towards Trump. Lindsey Graham was negative. Mitch McConnell, all of them were negative when it came to Trump until he became the nominee. Now they say, well, we better get in lockstep with him and let's just get out of this guy what we can get out of him. And that's something we don't do. We don't, if it ain't, I'm hearing some Black folks saying, I ain't voting, I'm just not gonna vote for anybody. Well, why not at least go with the lesser of two evils with an agenda that you give to them and say, here are 10 things on the list, and I'm expecting at least 5 of them, So that's just kind of the way I think about engagement.
I don't think we've held our local and state political figures to a certain standard. In the church, in the Black church, they always hold the preacher, the pastor, to a certain standard. There are certain things that the congregation doesn't want to see, don't want to hear. And if you do, you try to do it. They want you to do it in a way that is not publicized.
Right.
We're not holding our local officers, political officers, state officers accountable. We're not giving them, as you said, a plan. Long before we get to the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, we're not giving our local persons a plan and holding them accountable. One of the things that we're preaching now here where I am, we've got a young man that started a coalition. And one of the things that they're trying to do is get us as Black people to become more active and to attend the local board of supervisors, what you all would know as city council meetings. Be involved in those meetings. Show your face, come in large numbers to let them know you're concerned about what's taking place. That's where we've got to go now. We've got to get to a point where our congregations become more active in the process.
Most definitely. And not just leading up to the election day, but even after.
Even after.
Even with President Obama, we put President Obama in office and we just said, okay, we're all right now.
Yeah.
We didn't even hold him accountable. So
no, we didn't.
Literally, he did more for the LGBT community than he did for Black people.
Exactly.
Because that community held him accountable and said, here is what we want.
Yeah.
And we didn't do that. We were just so happy to have a Black guy in the White House, and we thought that we had overcome, but we didn't. And
when you talk about King and his dream, and I've heard people say this, well, that was a dream to get a Black president. It had to be more to that dream than us having residence in a home and being the leader of the free world. King's dream surely had to mean more to him and to us than just one day us having a Black president.
Oh, most definitely. When you look at the end of Dr. King's life, he was moving more into economics because he understood that the golden rule is he who has the gold rules.
That's right.
And when you have no money, when you have no economy, when you have no gold, G-O-L-D, then it's not much you don't have much power in this country. This is a capitalistic society, and Dr. King was moving in that economic way, pooling our resources, supporting Black-owned establishments. We got to the point where once we could go to white establishments, we neglected our own, and that was not Dr. King's dream. And it was not his dream just to have a Black president, but his dream was equality, total equality. I want equality, not just some, but I want equality in totality. And we don't have it yet, and thus we fight on.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the defunding of the police or the revamping of the police department?
Well, I think we have to understand the definition of defunding. Most people, when they think defunding, they think dismantling totally. I think what many are saying as it relates to defunding, there are certain areas where you can move funds to somewhere else. For instance, Rashad Brooks, who was killed here in Georgia, he was asleep in his car. He was intoxicated. There should have been a group that was funded that could have gone to that situation. We've got a guy here in the car. It didn't have to be guys who are militarized to go for a guy who's asleep in the car. What about people who are, not even armed, but this is your job now. This guy is asleep. Let's go see if it's a psychological problem, if it's this. Most of the time, because police officers, number one, they can be, you can become a police officer in a matter of weeks.
That's true.
Oh, and very little training. So they're not trained as it relates to de-escalation. They're trained, they come with the gun, the hand on the gun. So essentially what you're saying is I'm expecting trouble.
Exactly.
And if I expect trouble, then if he moves in a certain way, I got to kill him because my life is threatened because I expected him to be violent by virtue of the color of his skin. So I think when they're talking about defunding, for instance, police in school, come on. I mean, you know, has it gotten to that point where you have to have armed officers, you know, in schools? Now, maybe some schools it's gotten to that point, but you have to look at your local area and see um, other ways to handle that. So when I think of defunding, I'm thinking of moving a certain part of the budget to other areas that might could handle some of the more non-violent incidents where it's just like George Floyd. Uh, the police was called on him because he had a counterfeit bill. Well, could there have been another department? You knew he wasn't armed. You looked at him. He wasn't being violent. He had a counterfeit bill. Yeah. Now, the reality is we all probably have had some counterfeit bills. We ain't making the bills. We just didn't know it, you know, when we you know, got the bill. So
yeah,
that's what I consider when I look at defunding.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, we hear this, you're talking about this Black Lives Matter and how people will combat that and say all lives matter. We've never said, Black people have never said that all lives didn't matter. But all lives cannot matter if you're still not bothered and not concerned about a person who has a counterfeit bill, who is already on the ground, who has handcuffs on him, 4 officers, and one of them has his knee on his neck. A Black life cannot matter to nobody when you are not bothered by that.
Yes.
My issue has been, and will always be with that moment. There were 3 officers standing there watching this guy put his knee on this guy's neck. And neither of you did anything because of your allegiance to a fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what it boils down to.
Not your allegiance to humanity.
No, your allegiance to a fraternity. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to support you, McFarland, because we're friends, because we forged a friendship. So no matter what you do, good, bad, or indifferent, that's not going to change my allegiance to you. Mm-hmm. You can go and kill 20 people, but because of my allegiance, because of our connection to a certain organization, we're going to remain connected. They stood there, watched this man continuously do this, and nothing was done. Another incident, the white boy that killed all of the parishioners in Bible study in Charleston.
Yeah.
You take him to Burger King, feed him a meal, put on a bulletproof vest, but every Black man or young man, Trayvon Martin, killed by a non-law enforcement officer.
And he gets off.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the political arena, more so than voting for a president, we need to have a voice in how these judges and the judicial system may need to be defunded.
Well, I would not agree with you there. And that's why we've got to get involved in the local elections more than anything, because it's in those elections where the police chief is chosen,
Yeah.
Where your school board members, these are things that affect you every day. The
Every day.
district attorney, who is the district attorney who charges these people?
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
a
so
good
important thing that-
vetting system has to be implemented because, and I hate to say this, but so many of our own people, as we bring this conversation to a close, so many of our own race has been blessed with those positions. And there have been some instances where they were even changed, if you will, to go in a direction that was not the correct direction to go. And so we've got to be able to vet these people that we are voting for and that we are supporting, and that we as pastors stand up and try to propel our congregations to support. We as pastors have to be more vigilant in our vetting of these persons.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I really do agree. And we can't just give our votes away. You know, we can't just be taken for granted any longer.
Yeah.
And we as pastors, community leaders, church leaders, it's just incumbent upon us to stay engaged. We're here. We're not going anywhere. So we've got to just make the best of this situation.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage everybody, keep fighting. Keep fighting.
Yeah.
However you choose to do it. If it's marching, march on. If it's protesting, protest on. If
Yeah.
it's blackouts where we're not spending any money at this particular place, do it. If it's preaching, preach. If it's teaching, whatever your way is
Yeah.
of speaking truth to power, then it's
Yeah.
incumbent upon all of us. But by all means, we all must stay engaged in the
We must
process.
stay engaged. And in closing, we've got to also remember that all white people aren't bad.
That's true.
There are some who have no ill feelings or racial feelings towards us, and they mean us no harm.
Right.
And we've got to prayerfully allow God to lead us and direct us as we seek those persons out and be very mindful. Clinton McFarland, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for
Thank you for
having me.
your ministry. Thank you for being an example to so many of us who pastor and showing us that you can do major ministry and remain humble and still not mind sharing your wealth of knowledge. I thank you for your friendship, and
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to get you back up here to
Yeah.
Ebenezer and Exmore to preach and to do what you do best.
I look forward to it. Let me just say hello to all of the precious people of the Ebenezer Church. Thank you for your love and support of me and my ministry throughout the years. And I so look forward to coming back to Exmore, Virginia, and sharing with you. So we're going to have to pray this thing through so we can get back in church
There you go.
and
There
do
you
what
go.
we do. Thank you, Pastor, for your
Thank
love
you,
for
Doc.
humanity and for your commitment to the cause of Christ. God bless you.
Yeah, yeah. Let's have a word of prayer. God, our Father, we thank you for Clinton McFarland. We thank you for his family, for the Grace Baptist Church. We pray that you will continue to endow him with wisdom, continue to protect his wife and his children and all of the persons that are around him. Give him, oh God, not only the desires of his heart, but give him vision and provision. Bless us as we continue to forge this friendship, and all of the churches and races across this nation draw us together. We bind and declare and decree that COVID-19 shall have no place in Grace Baptist Church, nor in Ebenezer Baptist Church, nor in any other church. We declare and decree that we're already freed from that pandemic, and that you are really now ready to touch us as a race, touch us as a nation, put your arms and shield us and protect us. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Doc.
Blessings to you, my
Love
brother.
you, man.
Love you
Take
too,
care.
man.
When Ebenezer Talks with Pastor Milton Bunting.